That reverse tradition, so.
Peter, I mean, you guys.
Yeah, it sucks, but.
How y'all recovered from the tornado? It's part.
It's
That bad.
Ms. Lou tells me we do have a quorum. I'll go ahead and call to order the January 10th, 2024 meeting of the Transportation Coordinating Committee. Welcome, everybody. Hope everybody's had a happy new year so far. Merry Christmas and happy holidays and all that stuff. We do have a hybrid option for those who are not able to be here today, I believe, right? Staff will attempt to type questions into the room, into the chat if anybody has trouble hearing. I'll go ahead and introduce the first item, which is the approval of the November meeting minutes, as we didn't have a December meeting. Has everybody had an opportunity to read those minutes? Do I have a motion to approve or to endorse those minutes?
Second.
They are the December. Oh, I apologize. Never mind. We're the December meeting minutes. I'm sorry about that. So I had a motion. Did I have a second?
Okay.
Have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Any changes? Hearing none. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Next item on the agenda is the opportunity for public comment. Daniel, do we have anybody signed up to speak? Is there anybody in attendance here today from the public that might wish to speak? Okay, hearing none, I will close the public comments portion of the meeting. If anybody does have comments, those can be emailed to comments@gnrc.org. All right, we do have several action items on the agenda here today. The first is the committee bylaws. Daniel's gonna let the monkey have the football here. We talked about these last meeting, as everybody may recall. I believe in the packet there was a final draft that was provided for everybody. There were a few changes that were made. Specifically, if everybody goes through the bylaws at 4.3, during the discussion last month, we had some discussion related to the metropolitan government of Nashville and Davidson County. I think the intent there was just to change that to provide a general statement about any metropolitan government. And basically just clarifying that there's two individuals from each metropolitan government, so one representing the municipalities and one representing the county government generally. 4.4, there was some discussion about adding US DOT to the agency representatives. So there's wording in there now, each modal administration of the U.S. Department of Transportation, and then additional wording as well related to development districts, adding those in. So that apparently that's something that is pretty common about the state and does make sense. And then down at 8.6, there was some discussion about just clarifying that our partners at DOT, Federal Highway, FTA, they don't have a vote on anything here. They're just here for advisory purposes only. And so there's some wording there. So those are the only changes. That's what's in the final draft. Beyond that, it's what Mr. Skipper during his presentation last month gave a good thorough description of everything that's in there. It is what he went over. And so, I appreciate the staff working to put this together. It's a framework. So it's something that at least we have bylaws now, and I appreciate the work that they put into it, and working with us to get it into the shape that everybody wanted to be in. And so hearing that, or with that, Daniel, do you have anything to add as far as the bylaws?
Just a thank you to the bylaws committee. Your work, I think, resulted in a really clear document that lays out exactly what this group is responsible for. So thanks to everyone who reviewed it and provided comments.
All right, thank you, Daniel. So does anybody have any comments or concerns or questions about bylaws and what was in the packet? And hearing none, is there a motion? This is an action item that's on the agenda today. Is there a motion to endorse the bylaws as they're currently written in the final draft?
Make a motion to approve.
Do I have a second? I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? None. All in favor, please note by saying aye. All opposed, like sign. Hearing none, that item does pass. We have bylaws. All right, moving on to the next item on the agenda. Suballocated carbon reduction program. I'll hand it over to Daniel Caparella to make a presentation on that.
All right, thank you, Chair. So just as a reminder, carbon reduction program is a new program passed by the Infrastructure and Jobs Act. Have about 6.4 billion available nationwide, 139 million for Tennessee, and then for our two urbanized areas, 13.8 million and 1.9 million. That's over the course of our current 23 to 26 TIP. Eligible projects, pretty similar to CMAQ, ITS, electrification upgrades, street lighting, traffic signal. And then in terms of federal and local match, typically a 20% non-federal match, although there are some projects like ITS that are eligible for 100%. And then obligation deadline must be obligated within the 4 years of the apportionment. So just as a reminder, we prioritized phase 2. So phase 1 was completed a few months ago. We awarded those projects. Phase 2 prioritized funding in fiscal years 24 through 26. The criteria that are up on the slide as well as in the packet, so have to demonstrate a reduction in carbon emissions. Existing projects in need of additional funds will be prioritized over new starts. Can the funds be obligated? Is the project currently listed in the RTP? And then can the local jurisdiction provide a match if applicable? And then there's our timeline. Here's our table of just the available funds over the course of those fiscal years. We had about 788,000 left over from phase 1 in fiscal year 2023 that was awarded during this phase, as well as the full suballocation for fiscal years 24 through 26. And again, so total between the two urbanized areas, about 10 million, 10.4 million available. These are the applications we received. So there were 7 applications that we received throughout this process, totaling about 27.5 million in federal funds that were requested. Obviously, that's more than we have available, but that's just a reminder of what those who those applicants were. And then this is our list of proposed awards. I will note that we made a mistake in the packet on both the Metro Nashville and the Smyrna award amounts. Smyrna's was $1 million, and then Metro's was 3.5. So apologies for that. It is reflected correctly in our TIP app, and we will send out another update on those figures. But I'll just walk through quickly each award. So Franklin requested 280,000. We were able to fully fund that. Lebanon as well, 800,000, fully fund that. Metro was a partial award as they requested more than we actually had available. But that includes construction reserve, and Shay will walk through that in a minute. Mount Juliet, we were fully fund. Murfreesboro, fully fund with Murfreesboro suballocated funds. RTA's project was a partial award, and then Smyrna's was a full award, but includes construction reserve of those carbon reduction funds. So I'll hand it over to Shay to walk through what actually each of these projects were.
Yep, so the first one is Franklin's Murfreesboro Road project. That is for signal improvements for 280,000. And we're going to be doing that amendment at the next one. I'm going to go through the rest of them in the order that they're in your packet. So I'll just be going through the summary pages. So first we have Murfreesboro's Memorial Boulevard project. This is the only applicant for Murfreesboro UCA. And this adds about $1 million in federal MCRP funds for fiscal years 2024, 2025, and 2026 construction phases. And this is going to be doing traffic signal improvements and different technologies along this corridor. Next, we have Mount Juliet's intelligent transportation systems and signal improvements. All of the subsequent ones are in the Nashville-Davidson UCA, so there'll be UCRP funds. This one's adding near $1 million in federal UCRP funds to fiscal year 2024 construction phase, and this is going to be improving traffic operations at 13 intersections. Next, we have Lebanon's Intelligent Transportation System Phase 2. This adds $800,000 in federal UCRP funds for fiscal year 2025 construction phase. And this is signal improvements at 24 intersections. All of the first ones we've talked about so far are covering either cost overruns or anticipated cost overruns. The next project is RTA's regional bus service operations. This one is about $2.5 million in federal UCRP funds to fiscal years 2024 and 2025 implementation for regional commuter bus routes. The final two are going to be new projects. So these will be, once we get to the TIP process, would be potentially adding them to the TIP as well as the funding. So the first is Smyrna's Jefferson Pike project, which adds $450,000 in federal UCRP funds for fiscal year 2024 NEPA and design phases and fiscal year 2025 right-of-way. And this also will include a construction reserve portion. So it adds $640,000 in reserve carbon reduction funds to the fiscal year 2026 construction phase. And it's added as reserve according to the programming policy that states that construction phases are not formally programmed until the preliminary engineering phase is completed. And this project is going to be adding a left turn lane and enhancements to Sam Ridley Parkway. The final amendment is NDOT's Connect Downtown. And this was, as Daniel mentioned, we have a little bit of a correction from what's in the packet. It's updated in the TIP app. So this would add about $1 million in federal UCRP funds for the fiscal year 2024 NEPA and fiscal year 2025 design phases. And then again, per that programming policy, it would allocate about $2.25 million in reserve CRP for the fiscal year 2026 construction phase. And this project is a part of the Connect Downtown overall project, and it would be implementing adaptive signal systems in downtown Nashville.
All right, thank you, Shay. Does anybody have any questions about these awards before we move on to next steps? Oh, here's a map of where all the award locations were. Obviously, the Lebanon project has multiple intersections, so that's why you'll see lots of dots there. But this is just a map in terms of where they are geographically.
I don't want to get too far off the rails, but if you can go back on it comes up every, I don't know, year or so, I guess, where there's a discussion about it, the construction reserve. Can y'all explain what that is again?
Yeah, so it's essentially, it's not programmed funds, but so for CRP funds, typically we do SDBG construction reserve. So this is the first time we've done CRP, obviously, because it's a new funding source, but it reserves a certain amount of funds for the construction phase, and the local jurisdiction can't access those funds until they complete design. And so it's not technically programmed, but it's available and set aside for that project specifically. So whenever they, Metro and Smyrna, obviously, whenever they get to finishing design, get the notice to proceed for either right of way or construction, they can access those funds.
And the changes that were made there, looks like, just what I've noted there, as far as what was in our packet. RTA was shown in the packet at 5.5 million and it's 2.6.
Yeah, we made a couple just errors in terms of writing notes.
Smyrna was at 360 and it's actually 1 million.
Yes.
And then Metro or NDOT went from 1.2 to 3.5.
Yes.
Good. Anybody else have any questions about this item, the proposed awards?
Make a motion, Mr. Chairman. I'll make a motion to endorse the CRP awards. And then do I need to add and amend the TIP with those associated?
That'll be
things?
the next, that'll be the next item.
I'd make that motion with those different figures that staff explained, the updated figures.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second? Second. All right, any additional discussion?
We'll just, these TIP amendments are scheduled to be adopted at the TPV meeting next Wednesday.
Anybody else have anything? Any more discussion? Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye. Opposed? Hearing none, move on to the next item. Next item is the amendment of the Transportation Improvement Program. I'll turn it over to Shay Northfield, the TIP coordinator.
Yeah, so as a reminder, the TIP is a 4-year program that lists all regionally significant and federally funded transportation projects in the MPO area. It must be consistent with the regional transportation plan and be fiscally constrained. The current TIP, which is fiscal years 2023 to 2026, was adopted in November 2022 and accounts for approximately $1.7 billion. And you can access an interactive map of all of our projects at gnrc.org/TIP. So we just went through kind of an overview of the projects. So just to review for what the amendments would be, there are 6 amendments that would total about $10 million to the TIP as a result of the carbon reduction program. The first 4 are existing TIP projects, so the action would be to add funds. The final 2 are new projects, so the action would be to add the project to the TIP and add the funds. Are there any additional questions about any of the TIP amendments?
So the stuff that's in the packet, that it looks like that was correct, right? So it's what we had in the packet is the correct figures. Okay.
With the exception of the Connect Downtown one.
Yeah, got it. Okay. All right. Does anybody have any questions for Shay?
We've already out for public review.
Yes.
Okay.
Since the 4th.
Yeah, I figured just 'cause I know we're a shorter timeline between, okay.
Yeah, since we pushed the meeting back 1 week, but we posted last week. Yeah.
Any additional discussion or questions? Okay, hearing none, I'll ask for a motion to endorse cycle B amendments to the fiscal year 2023 through 2026 TIP. We'll move. Have a motion, and do we have a second? Second. Hearing none, or we have a motion and a second. Any additional discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. That moves us on to the last action item, updates to the safety performance measure targets, and I'll turn it over to Ashley Glasscock, Senior Research Analyst.
Thank you. So if you want to go to the next slide, I'll pass it up today and I'll just start.
I'll just start and quickly hand it off to Ashley. So this is just a reminder, most of you have been through this process before. But just to remind you of what our requirements are as an MPO. State DOTs and MPOs across the country are required to set annual performance targets for roadway safety. In 2021, our policy board, as well as this group, voted to make safety the region's top transportation priority and adopted regional safety targets. MPOs can either adopt their own regional targets or support the states. Our group decided to do our own regional targets with the goal of an annual 1% reduction in serious injuries and fatalities. Purpose of these targets is really to guide aspirational goals to reduce fatalities and serious injuries. It's really to improve safety across our transportation network. That can result in changes in policy or funding approaches. And then staff, we've continued to engage in safety planning efforts, whether it's through committees, engaging with stakeholders, or our own data analysis, which you'll see Ashley present. So I'll hand it off to her to give an overview of this year's targets.
So this is an area overview of the MPO. For 2023, we had over 100,000 people that were involved in a crash. That's roughly 6% of our MPO's population. Go to the next slide. As Daniel said, this is basically a summary table showing the previous regional targets. So the ones that we are going to be discussing how we did in comparison to, those are the ones that we had set for 2023. And then just reminding you of that goal by the year 2045. This is just a little bit of a reminder of what we're actually meaning when we're discussing the number of fatalities. So essentially what it is drivers, passengers, non-motorized users, anyone killed in an accident resulting from a vehicle. These aren't people that are dying in the right of way that don't have any kind of interaction with a vehicular accident, or they're dying of a natural causes before an impact. I do want to note that for the calendar year of 2023, that was the second deadliest year in the MPO's history in the past 20 years. It has now been the third deadliest for the state in the past 20 years as well. So far in 2023, we've had 223 people killed. Next slide. These first sets of charts that you're going to see are just reminding you of those scenarios that we adopted back in 2021. So that base year had an average of 197 fatalities for that year, and we took a 1% reduction against that over the course of the 2045 RTP, which gave us a goal of 152 fatalities or less by 2045. So that meant to stay on this trend line that the 2023 target had to keep fatalities under 189. Unfortunately, for 2023, we've already had 223 fatalities.
Well, those final numbers.
Those are still estimates. So FARS doesn't actually approve final numbers until 2025, but they'll probably change by 1 or 2 here or there, but we are currently, unfortunately, still waiting on people to die from the last year in order to count them. Slide. For number of serious injuries, what I really want to highlight here is that we did have an official definition change in 2019, which was playing into that lower value that we had for suspected serious injuries. But what I really want to highlight is that these are basically people that do not walk away from an accident. They're not just with a broken arm. These are people that have life-altering injuries. And so far in 2023, we had 1,095 people with those serious injuries. Next slide. When we originally set the targets back in 2021, the base year was 349.8 serious injuries. We took a 1% reduction against that to get serious injuries under 1,039 by the year 2045. Go to the next slide. So that meant that 2023, we needed to keep serious injuries under 1,297. We did come in so far under that with 1,095. Then when we look at number of non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries, you can see the formal definition at the top that basically includes pedestrians, bicyclists, other cyclists, or person-on-personal conveyances, scooters, things of that nature. These are basically people that are walking, biking, rolling, that are killed or they're seriously injured. And that happened to 173 people in 2023. Slide. When we look at when we officially adopted the targets, we had a base year of 178.6 non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries. We set a goal of a 1% annual reduction to get us to 138 or less non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries by 2045. And that meant that the 2023 target needed to keep non-motorists at below 171. And for 2023, we were at 173. So overall, this is just a summary table showing how we did in comparison to those targets. So for 2023, we were over our fatality target by 34 people. We were under our serious injury target by 202, and that's so far, it's our preliminary numbers. And then for number of non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries, we were over by 1. We did not include rate information on this table just because we lack VMT data available for the 2023. So then we wanted to expand on some of the characteristics that may be playing into those fatal crashes that we're seeing, serious injuries. And so in 2023, we had over 50,000 crashes, 102,000 people involved in those crashes. So we wanted to look at some of the driving behavior, driving characteristics that were disproportionately affecting our severe crashes. So each one of these categories that you see, they're not mutually exclusive. So you can't have someone that was speeding and drinking and driving, you likely do, or multiple parts of these categories. But we really wanted to said, look at the ones that are disproportionately affecting people. So for speeding, it accounted for 4% of the crashes, but affected over 4,000 people. Drinking and driving only accounted for 4% of the crashes in the region, but affected over 3,600 people. Unbelted occupants only accounted for 2% of the crashes, but affected 1,200 people. And unlicensed drivers accounted for almost 20% of the people involved in a crash. If you go to the next slide, I'll go into details on each of these driving characteristics.
Actually, real
Yes.
quick, I think I asked this before. I don't remember the answer, but do they track distracted driving?
They do track distracted driving, but it's very farly underreported. So it's very difficult to get consistent information on that because unless they either get a subpoena for the cell phone to prove that they were using it or it was in their hand at the time of impact, it's really hard for a police officer to make that judgment call that yes, it was due to distractions. But we are seeing it become more robust and a little bit better at getting that data. I guess. Yes.
What about following distance today? Is that something that they can track at all? How does that fall under speeding? But following distance to me is.
You probably would with the newer vehicles and the amount of information that those computers will track. But unfortunately, that's not something that we consistently have. It's like if they're tailgating or something of that nature, unless a police officer writes it in their narrative, that's the only way we would be able to determine that.
Go to court, subpoena that data.
Exactly. Yeah, it would take a while. He'd be tied up in court. You'll go to the next slide. I'm gonna go through a little bit more detail on each of those characteristics. So speeding, like I said, only accounts for 4% of the crashes. But yet when speeding is a factor, there's a 1 in 5 chance that someone is killed. They account for 14% of our severe injuries across the region. Next slide. For drinking and driving, again, those account for only 4% of the crashes, where it involves a driver that was drunk, but 1 in 4 people killed is the result of drinking and driving. Next slide. For unbelted occupants, they account for less than 2% of the crashes, less than 1% of the people that are involved in car accidents, but yet a quarter of the fatalities in the region had an occupant that wasn't wearing their seatbelt. Next slide. And then when we look at unlicensed drivers, 19,856 people are involved in a crash where one of the drivers at least didn't have a driver's license. 1 in 4 people that are killed in a crash involve at least one driver that didn't have a driver's license, and 1 in 3 people seriously injured involve someone without a license. Next slide.
Under the unbelted, is that only like, is it for all passengers in the car?
All
passengers?
passengers.
Not necessarily just the.
Not just the
driver.
drivers. Yep, that's anybody in the vehicle not wearing their seatbelt that was killed, regardless of them being a driver or. And then when we look at location-based information, this is just the geographic distribution of the total severe crashes from 2018 to 2022. You can see that mostly urban centers show up, interstates, principal arterials, things that you would typically expect to see. And then if you go to the next slide, we've normalized that by volume. So looking at the vehicle miles traveled and showing that basically the suburban areas, more rural areas have a higher rate of those severe crashes occurring, which you would assume with lack of resources getting ambulances or emergency vehicles to them, things of that nature would cause that rate to increase. Next slide. And then when we look at severe crashes normalized by total crashes, so this is the probability that that area will result in a severe crash. And again, you can see it showing up in more of the rural areas or outskirts of urban centers. And then we're getting to the proposed targets. So looking at targets for this next calendar year. So for fatalities to keep us on that trend line to get us to that 2045 goal, we need fatalities to stay under 187 for this calendar year. If you go to the next slide, for serious injuries, that means that we need to keep those below 1,284 to reach our 2045 goal. If you go to the next slide. For non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries, we need to keep those below 170 in order to reach our goal by 2045. And this is just a table summarizing everything that I just discussed in those previous charts. I'll pass it off to Daniel.
And I'll go to this. And I'll just say, obviously, we're not meeting our targets. And we need to engage in more detailed discussions. So I invite everyone here to attend our TPV meeting next week. We just got this data pretty recently, so we're going to go into a little bit more detail in that presentation. So I encourage you to attend, even if it's just virtually, so we can have more detailed discussion with our mayors and figure out some potential solutions as well. But other than that, I'll hand it to Josh.
On the slide showing the, the actuals and that kind of thing where you guys are charting them, it looks like coming out of the pandemic, we did this, right? And then in the last year, every one of them, it looks like had a downward. What do you think's going on there?
Well, for the fatalities, I think it still kind of increases. Like we're still waiting on those final numbers for the most part. But for the most part, what we've noticed is that people are driving faster. So we're moving from hurting less people. So the serious injuries tend to decrease, but we're starting to see the increase in fatalities. So we think that speeding at least seems to become more of a factor on a lot of the crash reports. But a lot of them are tapering off. And I'm not sure if that's due to people working from home, getting people volume off the roadway. I'm not entirely sure of what's causing that kind of steep decline in that last year. But we're definitely going to look into the details of those crash reports.
Am I looking at it right? The gray line is
That's gray data.
it's actuals, basically.
Yep. It is.
So like,
And we had 275 fatalities last year, and we're looking at 223 so far this year. But with this meeting being so close to the end of last year, if they had a fatality at 11 p.m. on New Year's Eve, that one probably hasn't made it into the database yet. Yeah.
So it could end up being higher.
Yeah, it'll probably be a few higher by that point.
And that's probably something to be aware of. I mean, as Ashley said, one of the reasons why we can't finalize the data is because people are essentially still fighting for their lives. So that adds any gravity to the situation.
Actually, you may have said this and I may not have heard it, but what about adding new drivers, tracking new drivers over time, maybe over a time period, new drivers added to the driver license?
Oh, like actually tracking the actual driver themselves through the.
Volume of new drivers added, younger new drivers added.
Yeah, you can get that information from like the driver's license office and things. So like, yeah, I know what you're trying to say. There's more influx of people just having gotten their license on the roadways than previous years or not. We could look at driver's license data to try to answer that question.
Makes sense, but
Yeah, that's what a lot of people are typically tracking. One of the main areas of concern are young drivers. Typically those 15 and 16. Yeah.
I think after we have this data for a few years, it'd be interesting to look at, maybe not looking at a long-term, just a single linear trend line, but looking at, if you want to stay linear, just because it's a little simpler to understand and mathematically look at, you could do multiple linear trend lines over several year periods and do multiple janks in that, because as we know, there's major split points, like you look at the pandemic, maybe that being a major trend change in traffic, where you could put a jank there in the pandemic at a certain point, and the trends change over time. So you're not looking at, hey, we're always missing. That's been one of my kind of heartburn moments with setting these trends. I'm always I don't want to come across as saying that I'm not in favor of safety, because I absolutely am as an engineer, but I'm also looking at the optics of setting trends that we never meet, because people just don't dive into the data like they used to. So we're always set safety trends and safety goals that, all the headline ever says, well, we didn't meet our goal, didn't meet our goal, didn't meet your goal. It's like, what do you guys do? You'll never meat your goal. You'll never meet your goal. So we go look at the headlines. So I think looking at these more in depth and saying, do we need to put more janks in there, more break points in there, and adjust those trend lines every few years as there's a major event in transportation, or in just kind of in the universe that changes things, or maybe looking at maybe a non-linear trend line. I don't want to look at like a sixth order polynomial or something like that that's looking like a sine wave going through there. That doesn't make any sense, but just something along those lines.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that.
Whatever you do, just remember, I'm a Weekly County school product, so you don't make it too complicated. But on some of these, like the overall fatality numbers, I've always found it hard to believe that we're ever going to meet that. You know what I mean? Because there's more people moving here. You know what I'm saying? There's just the overall number. It's going to be exceedingly difficult to be on.
That's where that's the big heartburn for me, is when you see an influx, because we've gone, and I'll say over the last 20 or 30 years, you've gone from Tennessee being a more rural state to being much more kind of the communities, it states, a lot more urbanized areas than we used to have over the last, 30, 40, 50 years. With so many more people, it's just not realistic to think you can set a hard number of fatalities when that many more people are moving in. However, you can look at the actual rate going down.
Of it.
So I think the rate can go down, but not necessarily the hard number. So I think looking at those two things, maybe you can slow the number itself going up, so it may still rise, but you can actually make the trend line go down for the rate. And so that's looking at those things and splitting those.
What's always interested me about doing that too is, our role, what is, what's the policy gonna be? Like, what do we do to actually make that happen?
And I think that's the important part. I think the way that I think about it is more about us setting these targets, especially on the MPO level, because there aren't technically any like consequences for us not meeting the targets, is that hopefully they result in changes in the way that we do things. Whether that's funding or policy, whether it's what local governments do in terms of enforcement or, funding different safety projects that they may not have in the past. I think that's sort of the mindset that I would hope that targets would support, is say, all right, us setting these targets is actually just a commitment to saying that we are going to improve safety, even if we don't think it's realistic or possible. It is possible. It just requires us and everyone involved, whether it's the MPO or state agencies or, the Highway Safety Department, everyone sort of trying to figure out how we can meet these targets, because it's not just our region. And I will say that this is a nationwide issue, and I'm sure Melanie can.
And I think it's the opportunity to get it right before at some point in the future it becomes enforceable, because somebody looks at it and says, and we finally everybody kind of gets tired of it and says, look, you made these, we don't enforce anything here, and you've made these lofty goals. You've promised the people a lot, but you never enforce anything on yourself. So someday in the future, maybe these goals are enforced on communities nationwide, worldwide, whatever have you. And so we need to get it right. This is our opportunity to get it right when it's not coming out of the community's public, our pocketbooks. So,
right.
So that's one thing where I think we're ahead of the curve on.
Yeah. And I think one thing to focus on in terms of just MPO level is we have control over a fair amount of funding. And so, our board can make decisions to change how we allocate funding if safety is the top priority. So I think that's sort of where the conversation should go, and what we'll be discussing with the DPB next week.
And Daniel, I think I always got to give the National MPO kudos on even setting their own safety targets. It's not something that in the state, but even nationwide, that a lot of MPOs are doing. Generally, the practice is to support the state's targets, which is, there's nothing wrong with that, but I do think it kind of shows that you are taking ownership over, you do have a lot of say in what's being programmed, right? What are we putting our money, like, where our mouth is in a way. And I think, Daniel, like you had said too, it's not just programming funds. It's, you all can go back to your jurisdiction and see how can we make safety priority in every single thing we do. A lot at the FWA level, we talk about the safe systems approach. It's not just about transportation investments. It's about all of these other things working in tandem to improve safety. So always got to give y'all kudos on, trying to set your own targets and trying to make progress towards them. It is a nationwide issue. That's the Safe Streets and Roads for All grant is there for a reason, because we're seeing it across the board where fatalities are increasing. And we all recognize that we got to do something about it. So, but really do appreciate all y'all working on setting your own targets. I do think it's really good practice, or commendable practice.
Yeah, and the connection between the money we can spend on projects and that kind of stuff, and how you fix the issues that Ashley was talking about, which is primarily revolves around irresponsible people, right? And so that's something that interests me is, what influence do we have to affect a change in that? Because that's more of a law enforcement question than a transportation funding question. Does anybody else have any questions or comments? I think we're being asked to endorse these today, so I'll ask for a motion to endorse the updates to the performance measure targets. I have a motion. I have a second. I have a motion and a second. Is there any additional discussion or questions for Ashley? Ashley, did you have anything else to add? Okay. All right. We have a motion and a second on the floor. If there's no additional discussion, do I have all in favor? Please vote by saying aye. I'm opposed, like sign. All right, Hearing none, that passes. Moving on to the last item on the agenda, informational items. We didn't have any. The next item rather is reports. Melanie, do you have anything to report for federal partners?
Two quick things I wanted to touch on. I wanted to first, since we're on safety, want to congratulate Williamson County and City of Nashville. They both got awarded the kind of the second round of the SS4A grants award. So Williamson County got a planning grant award, and then Nashville, which I'm sure most people have heard about, got just over $13 million for the We Are Nolensville Pike project. So congrats to them. Excited to work with those communities on pushing those grants forward. And then another funding opportunity that just was released in late December, the Bridge Investment Program. They've released the 23 through 26 bridge project grant application and the planning grant application. It's like just around $10 billion made available through that. Bridge projects are up to $100 million. Like that's the project cost, and 80% would be eligible for this program. And then planning grants, there's no maximum or minimum, but again, 80% of the total eligible cost would be reimbursable through this program. Planning grants would be due February 19th, and then the bridge implementation grants would be due March 19th.
Is it just locals that are eligible for the Bridge Investment Program, or is it also state?
It's also state.
Okay.
I have to double check on the eligible entities.
Any questions for Melanie? All right, moving on to the next report. Stacy Orson with TDOT.
Couple things. So our planning grants is open until the 19th. And I think he's gonna try to,
Yeah, I've got it.
pull up our website on that. So all the information is located on our website. There's some information there. There's a PowerPoint that hopefully should address any questions that you may have. There's a big red button there that you click on, and it's a fillable form that you can complete your application. Those are due the 19th. We're looking to try to get those reviewed and through our process and to a notice to proceed April, and those grant and the task orders will run April to March on those. So if you
I have it on the wrong computer.
okay.
I'll send both of those links out.
Okay.
With
We'll send the link out. But TDOT planning grants, if you Google that, it will pull those up, and all the information is on the page there. I've already seen some from the jurisdictions within the MPO already apply. So good luck to you there. We're looking to fund about somewhere between 20 and 30 projects across the state with that program. The other item as well is the rollout of our 10-year plan that everybody's seen. Again, if you go to the to Build With Us site, you can pull up all the information related to the 10-year plan. I'm gonna hit on some highlights of that real quick. So I mean, everybody's been used to seeing the 3-year work program come out, so that's been expanded to show a full 10 years of the program. And so it's approximately $15 billion into the program. So that's at a static level. The amount that we get back from the feds at 1.2 billion plus the 3 billion that we received last year from General Assembly. So that's where that number is. Obviously that number can fluctuate, hopefully to the increase, which could have impacts on the program as well. As you've heard us say before, about half of that 1.2 that goes towards state of good repair. So that does kind of limit our funding right off the bat right there. Couple points I want to make, or several points really. In the past, we're hitting about 50% of our lettings. Over the last couple of years, we've increased that to around 90%. Obviously, our goal is 100%. So that's a big part of why this plan is laid out the way it is, so that we can hit those lettings as close to 100% as possible. Everything was recosted. into the plan and, to, to get as close as we can to those numbers so we can meet those goals with the money that's available. So a couple of things about it, in regions 1, 2, and 3. So there's some set aside there for the choice lanes that everybody's seen the presentation, hopefully on that. So there's set asides in the 3 regions for that at 250 million. And then in region 4, the I-55 bridge across the Mississippi River there is the project there for that set aside. Project prioritization, I know has been a question. So in the past, you all, along with the executive board, have prioritized, your priorities through the planning process of the MPO. So just want to kind of let everybody know that that process was utilized as a part of the prioritization process as we built the 10-year plan. So that information has been taken from you all from the last few years as well. With all that said, financial constraints have never really been applied to our project selection process until, so we kind of forced us to make hard decisions, leave some projects out of the 10-year plan. So really it's a, fiscally responsible plan that meets those goals and gets those projects to letting, on time. So in the plan itself, there's 93 specific projects. I know the statewide partnership program as well, that some of you all submitted projects for that. So there were 6 of those projects that were selected statewide as well. So again, the plan represents our, best scenario with resources available. But we'll continue to look for other resources as additional funding becomes available from federal highway. We'll look to match those using the example of the bridge in Memphis. We're looking to partner with Arkansas as well as some federal dollars for that project. That's going to be about $1 billion project. And so we're looking at 250 from our side, the Arkansas side, along with about $500 million from federal dollars. So that's the things that we'll continue to look for. Again, like always, like the 3-year plan, it will be reviewed annually. Like always, and so obviously the dollars can change, things can occur. The statewide partnership program, we look to build on that program, and we'll have some additional information on that as well. So there again, we've gotten a lot of different feedback from that. So again, that's a lot of information. Again, there's a lot more information on the website related to that. You can see all the list of projects are there. There's a couple of informational videos and some presentations on there to hopefully answer any of your questions. If you have specific project questions, please get those to us. We'll be reaching out again prior to especially before the executive board meeting, so that we can have our folks from the region that know the more specifics on projects, so that we can be prepared to answer those. Or obviously we will be glad to schedule meetings and meet with the community individually if you have a specific project question. I know there's a lot of those. What I refer to as the hybrid projects that you all manage locally, and so some of those did have received some impacts as well. So we need to have those conversations as well. So just please inform us if you have those.
Stacey, I wondered if you could say a little bit more about how MPO priorities were included into the prioritization process.
The typical balance is about 25% from the regional input and the MPO's input. So again, we provided all that, your priorities that you all provide through your planning process. So that was integrated all into part of the process. There's a formula that's used that kind of that lays those things out. But obviously in the end, it's got to be there's a big impact of that is project preparedness. So is that project ready? you know, if a project's gotten so far along, or if it's tied up in some of the earlier phases like environmental or in the right of way process, we don't think it can meet that letting date that we have out there. So again, it's part of the process. I'm sorry, that's kind of vague, but
Sure.
those
So,
those
I
numbers,
guess, how did
those
you,
numbers are integrated in there.
yeah, how did you interpret our priorities if you didn't ask us for them?
Repeat.
Well, because we didn't receive a request about the priorities.
Right.
And so if you're using our previous priorities, how did you interpret those for
Right.
current projects?
So they were interpreted from the past years. We didn't ask for additional rankings or additional information this year. Right. Because this process was already in place to integrate those numbers in from your past rankings. And again, we will look at that annually, and we'll continue to build on how we build that relationship and how we utilize that process.
Could you share with us the 6 that actually were selected? Do you have those by chance?
I don't. I can pull it up. I just have to pull it up. I can look it up. Yeah. The 6 across the state. Yeah. Yeah, they're in there, but I can pull it up in just a second.
Was that the public-private partnership? One of them was I-24, I think, wasn't it? One of them was I-24, right?
Oh, he's talking about the municipality
Partnership
partnership.
Oh, I got you.
I know off the top of my head, I know Mount Juliet was one of those projects in this area. If anybody's here that got one, you could probably remember faster than I can.
Well, any other questions for Stacy?
And does Daniel, do you have any updates from your side?
I think that our, some of our multimodal grant programs are gonna be coming out very soon. That's the TAP Improve and Multimodal Access Grant. So if any of your communities applied for that, then keep an ear out. And I think that's it from our end.
As you said, the planning grant deadline was January 19th, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
The statewide partnership projects for our region were the Sumner County, Saundersville Road at State Route 386, and then Region 3, Wilson Interstate 40, new interchange at Central Pike.
Question. In the 10-year plan, there's an estimated construction year listed for each project. If that project gets to ready for construction sooner, is there any chance those dates can be adjusted or those hard set years? So like the Central Pike interchange, it's listed as 2030. We're estimating to be ready for construction around 2027. So do you see any chance of those dates being adjusted?
Yeah, good question. And again, everything will be evaluated annually, and so there could be some fluctuation there for sure.
Additional questions for TDOT? Thank you, Stacy. Next item is the chair's report. I don't have anything for you guys today, so I'll hand it over to Daniel for the staff report.
All right, so I'll start just by, we've got a certificate of appreciation for Joe Horn. He's retiring. This is his last meeting. We just wanted to thank you for all your years of service. I guess it's been over 30 years. You might be the longest serving MPO member of all time, so. All right. So we just wanted to thank you for all your years of service and provide you with I guess a plaque. So thank you.
I will say this, I attended my first MPO meeting when I was baby planner Metro in 1980. And I guess it was a rite of passage. They would send you to all the meetings so you could sit in on them. So I sat in my first MPO meeting, and then I went back to my primary job, which was to copy federal registers for Bill Lewis, Bob Krasinski. But you are old enough to remember those guys. But thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. I appreciate all the good work this board's done through the years.
All right, and then at the back of your packet, it's what we typically include, our trip status report. So that's updated as of the for two months. So as of December 31st, the first 2 months of fiscal year 2024. So those if you look through those, I'm not going to go through every single one right now, but we'll have our typical overview overall for the tip period, and then obligation for just that fiscal year, as well as the month that this specific report is for, and then at the back, obligations on locally managed projects. So look through that and let us know if you have any questions. And then finally, I'll go through some of the upcoming meetings. Obviously, we have today's meeting and next meeting for the Transportation Policy Board. And then February 7th is our next Transportation Coordinating Committee meeting. I think that's all I have.
Okay. Thank you, Daniel. That's the last item on our.
Oh, I'm sorry. This is our 2024 meeting preview. So I'll send this out with a follow-up email, but I guess across all of our different bodies, we've got Regional Council, Transportation Policy Board, and then of course TCC starting up BPAC again next month, as well as Environmental Roundtable. So all of this will be posted on our website. So please go to that if you're wondering when our meetings are. All right. Sorry about that, Josh.
Are you sure?
Yeah, I'm sure.
All right. That's it. That's all we have on the agenda. Is there any other business to come before the board?
Just gonna say bridge investment program, state, MPOs, and local jurisdictional eligible.
Not too fast. I couldn't understand a word of that. What'd you say?
I'll email you, don't worry. States, MPOs, and local jurisdictions are all eligible applicants for the bridge investment program. Thanks.
Anybody else have anything?
Again, Daniel called those
I'm
out.
trying to hit. Yeah.
Come on, Gleason. I know, so if you go to the plan itself, there's basically a listing of all the projects. You can see all the statewide. It breaks down all those different ones, so they're pretty well clearly listed there.
Thank you, Steve. All right. Anybody else? All right. Hearing none, we are adjourned.
Leave your name tags on the table.
Should probably find you.
You can take yours, Joe.